As a result of the coronavirus pandemic and the impact that this has on exams and the examinations that are coming up in the summer of this year, all of the exam boards that will be examining you on your particular subjects are going to be presenting advanced information. Now, this is something that is already released for all subjects, and effectively what advanced information is designed to do is to allow you to see where the main focus of examination is going to be when it comes to your exams in the summer. So the aim of advanced information isn't to give you effectively what the questions are going to be or to tell you where all of the focus is going to be, but it is just to give you a guidance as to where you may be trying to put your time into the exam. So whereabouts within the specification you ought to be putting your time more clearly. So what's important is, what we're going to do is we're going to go through and talk about all of the different subjects that we teach on the Learning Academy and talk about the advanced information that's been provided for them. And then over the next few months, we're going to start to, whilst also teaching the content that we're still teaching at the moment, we're also going to take particular care to focus and provide more detailed information and more detailed lessons on some of the advanced information subjects that are being released. So it's basically for our revision to go into more depth on these specific topics. And we're going to begin by talking about politics. So this is the first one for AQA, the A Level Politics Advanced Information. Now, it's important to note that there are no changes to the structure of the exams and the papers. So effectively all this is telling you is where the focus of the questions are going to be, or at least where the main focus of the questions are going to be. It doesn't give you all of the information, it's just giving you a little bit of a guidance as to where you should be really focusing your revision on, which is very helpful. So Paper 1 is divided into a number of different topics, and these are the topics where you should be focusing the majority of your attention, or at least you should be aware that these are the topics that are going to have they're going to be focused on in the exams. So when it comes to the British Constitution, the nature and the sources of the British Constitution. This includes talking about things such as the idea of the uncodified constitution, the idea that the British Constitution is uncodified, the nature of entrenchment, the nature of flexibility of the British Constitution, and then the sources of the British Constitution. So things like statute law, common law, constitutional conventions is also very important. And then maybe also you should focus a little bit of attention on the principles of the British Constitution. So things like parliamentary sovereignty, the rule of law, etc., etc., etc. The second of these topics is the scrutiny of the executive and how effective the scrutiny of the executive is in practice. So this relates to the role of Parliament in its ability to scrutinise the government, the executive. So you can talk about things like the parliamentary committee system that exists, talk about the different kinds of questions to various ministers of state, including things like Prime Minister's questions as well. That's where your focus on Parliament ought to be. You should be looking specifically at the focus on Parliament. When it comes to the judiciary, they're asking us here about the role of the Supreme Court and its impact on government, legislature, and policy process. Okay, so the impact that the Supreme Court has on the government and the ability for the government to do their job, and also the ways in which the Supreme Court impacts the legislature and the way in which policy is created and the impact that the Supreme Court has on that. Now, the third point here on the democracy and participation, the point here is just the nature of democracy. Now, that's quite vague. It can be quite, we could be talking about a number of different things here. So we'll get back to you on the specific details that really ought to be focused in on when it comes to the nature of democracy. But the last two here on paper 1 are quite interesting. So when it comes to elections and referenda, the important things to focus on would be the influence of the media on the outcomes of elections. That's going to be one that's going to be really important to focus on. And then finally, the party structures and functions of the three major political parties in the UK, Conservative, Labour and Lib Dems. So a simple thing to focus on there as well. Moving on to paper 2, we have to talk about, we're talking about US policy, of course, and US politics. And the first one is the constraints on the president's ability to exercise their powers. So we're talking about specifically focusing on the limitations on the president's power. So we could talk about, divide that into both, for example, constitutional limitations on the president's powers, as well as other limitations that are what we would describe as political limitations on the president's powers. We've very, very recently done lessons on those. And again, like I've mentioned earlier, we're going to be continuing and doing more detailed lessons focusing in on these advanced information topics that have been released. When it comes to elections and the election process in the US, the main focus is voting behavior. That's where you should be really focusing your attention on the voting behavior and the way people vote in the USA. And then when it comes to pressure groups, the power of pressure groups is one thing that we need to be focusing on for the US politics topic. And then when we're talking about a number of different relating to comparative politics, so we have the theoretical approaches to comparative politics. That's something that's going to be a main focus. But then, really importantly, at the bottom, these two here, when it comes to constitutional arrangements and civil rights, when it comes to comparing the UK and US constitutions, the main focus is going to be on the similarities and differences between devolution and federalism. So the way in which devolution and federalism are either very similar and very different. We're going to do a very specific lesson on that very, very shortly. And then finally, for paper 2, we're talking about the protection of civil rights and the differences between the US and the UK when it comes to the protection of civil rights. Now, this is something that obviously it's important to note that this is something that is going to be relying on information from all these different topics as well. So the point of this video and the point of the advanced information isn't to just tell you that these are the things you have to focus on and you will not or you should not revise anything else. You should be revising everything still, because there's going to be lots of crossover and ability for you to draw from other areas to make points when it comes to other stuff as well. But what the advanced information is it's just giving you warning as to really where a lot of the focus is going to be, and if you can focus on these different areas, then you're going to be a lot better off in the exam. And then finally, they've put section B for paper 3, focusing on the political ideology of conservatism. So focusing on conservatism will be something that's important, and it's important that we have something here. We have amendment for subject content 3.2.1.3, the executive branch of government, president. So 2.1. What's they say? 3.2.1.3. This one here, executive government. So there might be some changes to that as well. But ultimately, this is the advanced information for the A-level politics for AQA. If you do any of the other subjects that we teach, like the history modules, we'll be doing the advanced information videos for them as well. And as I said, we're going to be focusing on drawing people's attention to these subjects and to these topics in later videos as we get closer and closer to exam period in June.